to the coronavirus and the outer planets. When an event occurs that affects the entire world, it's time to look at the placement of the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. These are the slow-moving ones that activate the collective unconscious, collective experience, and collective behaviors. In the case of the coronavirus and the worldwide reaction to it, we see the outer planets working like an orchestra. Each is motivated by its own concerns, and each also brings in something the others can't. Now, in this case, Saturn is also a player, not an outer planet. It must be taken into account right now because it's sitting alongside the grand poobah of the planets, Pluto, as part of the Pluto-Saturn conjunction, which seems to be the underlying force behind this event. Right now, the outer planets aren't just attempting to raise our consciousness. They seem to be laying the groundwork for a future planetary occurrence. But let's start with the most obvious actor, Neptune. Neptune is the planet associated with illness, especially public health, and viruses in specific, due to the unpredictability of outbreaks and remissions. Viruses are tiny shapeshifters, and they escape treatments that kill bacterial infections. These are features of viruses that put them squarely in Neptune's limpid realm. Neptune is the planet associated with isolation and imprisonment, and that is in part because of illnesses association with self-isolation and even quarantine, which means isolation imposed from an outside agency. Another fishy aspect of Neptune can be seen in the fact that a great many people are of the opinion that nothing is really happening here. I live with a trauma nurse who thinks the current reaction to the coronavirus is nothing more than media hype. To quote her, "I'm not going to worry until there's someone pushing a wagon down the street yelling, 'Bring out your dead.'" Even though Western astrology covers the whole Western world, I do live in the American bubble, so I'm going to speak from an American vantage point. It's quite a perspective these days. The US is definitely tangled up in the cord between the two fish. All the way up to the top, we have someone who moved the pandemic response team to the CDC 2 years ago, then defunded the CDC, then called the whole thing a hoax, then tried to quell fears by giving a speech absolutely riddled with misinformation, and then declared a national emergency. The first step there was, of course, to infuse Wall Street with $1.5 trillion, but we still have no test kits, so we don't even know who's sick. Neptune was once called the planet of delusion, deception, confusion. If you want all that in one place, watch the White House. However, things don't have to be real in order to be an expression of Neptune. This is the planet of imagination, miscalculation, double messages, panic, and mass hysteria. Ruler of illusion, Neptune was, in the past, associated with hypnosis and magic. Our modern version of those things is mass media. And mass media has been a major factor in the collective response to the coronavirus. Also, the ruler of poisons. Anything Neptune touches can easily become toxic. And the toxic sea of media we are subject to has done little to help matters here. You have alternative channels saying, forget it, it's stupid. Then you have a major network inside of an oxygen tent in Georgia. Some sick guy with a nebulizer in his lap is going on about he and the whole choir at his church, who were all coughing all over each other, all got sick and they were all being tested by the devil. Once in a while, the camera pans past an expert and then to the empty shelves at the store. If you're watching all that, keep a bottle of Ativan on a string around your neck, right? But all this brings us to the churning heart of Neptune, where it really doesn't matter if there's truly something to fear or there isn't. Neptune cares not if we're dealing with reality or a figment. Neptune is a servant, a carrier for another message. What message might that be? This is where we turn to the outermost planet, Pluto, god of the underworld, which is in friendly sextile to Neptune at the moment. Pluto is always a secret spiller. It brings rot, corruption, scandal, and true intentions to light. When in the sign of Capricorn, it reveals something about the establishment. The establishment is all those agencies in which we have traditionally put our trust. We give the establishment power, and it's supposed to be there to give us security in moments just like this. The establishment is supposed to take care of things too large for us to take care of as individuals. Capricorn's establishment surrounds government, the banking system, and law and order agencies for starters. So when Pluto, the planet of decomposition, moves through Capricorn, it shows the decay of these agencies. Pluto's ingress into Capricorn happened in 2008 with the financial crash. Ever since, it's been revealing the truth about American society, and that is that the American dream is strangely difficult to manage, at least for people under 45. We aren't really free, and we don't really have a democracy. In short, both power and wealth are concentrated in the hands of a very few. Certain segments of society see this quite clearly because they're swimming around in the truth of it every day. Other segments are more removed, and some would truly be surprised to learn how disadvantaged life is for so many. The ruling class in Washington knows the state of affairs. They just don't care. The depths of our plutocracy will come into sharp relief soon enough, because that's Pluto's job when in the sign of the goat. I mentioned a few moments ago that the outer planets, led by Pluto-Saturn, are paving the way for a planetary occurrence in the future. I was referring to the Pluto return in the chart of the United States. A return is when a planet comes back to the exact position it was in on the day someone or something was born. The return of Pluto happens once every roughly 248 years, So while a human can't experience one, a country can. And the United States is coming up on hers. It will be exact for the first time in February of 2022. What can we expect? Well, since Pluto's main focus is power, all power issues are on the table. Perhaps America falls from superpower status. Perhaps an authoritarian rises to power. Or perhaps the power shifts from an elite class of politicians and corporate jackals back to the people. We know power will be the theme. Since America's natal Pluto is in Cap, we also know that the power shift will have to do with the government and the established order. It's in the second house of America's natal chart, and that tells us it will have a huge financial component. I think it's likely that the Pluto-Saturn conjunction is using this virus as a means of setting up the Pluto return. But Pluto is also deep in the thick of everything that's going on right now, too. I was on Facebook yesterday looking at comments about COVID-19. One said, I have my MREs, my water stock, and my seed allotment. I'm ready to hunker down for as long as it takes. Another said, good God, I want this virus to go back to the hell it came from. I don't know if the virus came from hell or if that lady is going to be hunkered down for so long she'll need a seed allotment. But these comments embody something important about the Pluto-Saturn conjunction, and that is its apocalyptic tone. The truth is that most of us have been feeling a tension rising on planet Earth for years now, and a pandemic feels right. It has a certain blobby Neptunian symmetry to it. And it also shows us something we need to be reminded of. It shows us just how interconnected we are. Now go grab a roll of toilet paper off your stockpile because we're going to bring Uranus into the mix. What you're seeing around you right now is a quintessential example of Uranian disruption. The closing of businesses, meeting places, restaurants, bars, arenas, schools. Even in its highest expression, Uranus brings a bumpy ride. It brings unexpected detours and new ways to operate. Uranus, being in the early degrees of the sign Taurus, is going to affect personal finances, possessions, commerce. It rules disruptions in inventory and business. Changes in diet and creature comforts are also likely to come. We're seeing a dramatic drop in livelihoods, and those who continue to work are moving to a digital way of interacting, which is also Uranus's idea, because it's the planet of remote communication and technology. Uranus is exploding the personal finances of a huge percentage of the citizenry. I'm talking about the quarter of Americans who work for under $10 an hour, and half of Americans who have nothing in the bank and no cushion to replace lost income. A sea of workers gets their incomes in the service industry, like bartenders and valets and waitresses and dishwashers and cleaners and dog walkers and personal trainers. These workers make nothing when an establishment closes down. and when people stay home. Small businesses that depend on foot traffic are dying. Throughout the travel industry, people are being laid off through no fault of their own, and college loans are hanging over the heads of millions of formerly underemployed, now unemployed people. And what if you're in ticket sales or the convention business? What then? This is going to add up to a serious problem because it seems that this experience is going to linger for months. Uranus is acting like an accelerant on a fire that's been burning in the US economy. The fire of low-wage, no-benefit jobs with not much opportunity to advance and no security. No deal, no sick days, no nothing. And many of the jobs in the gig economy are contract on top of it. That means workers don't qualify for unemployment benefits. On the other hand, it's nice to know that since we don't manufacture much of anything anymore, thanks to trade agreements that benefited American companies, we are dependent on other countries for the things we need. That makes you rest your head easy at night. We're going by way of the fall of Rome almost exactly. Everything from a crumbling, neglected infrastructure to outsourcing to wealth inequality to military blunders to the numbing out of the citizenry. America is following a more modern version of Rome's path. There is time to course correct, however. You see, both Pluto and Saturn are known to bring reckonings. The chickens come home to roost, so to speak. In other words, realistic Capricorn shows that behaviors have consequences. You can't escape that. And if you ask the goat, adults don't want to. Pluto and Saturn are the bullies of the zodiac on the negative end of things. So the conjunction sheds light on the concept of exploitation. During the last Pluto-Saturn conjunction in Capricorn, the Atlantic slave trade opened up. During one in Taurus, you had the peasant revolt. During another in Taurus, you had the bloody American labor wars. Pluto-Saturn is a time of recognition. That is, recognition of the yawning chasm between the rich and poor, the powerful and the powerless. Pluto's contribution is the will to gain back that power, and Saturn's gift is to organize the fight. The economic impact of the coronavirus is going to be extreme, if you ask me. And I doubt there'll be any real relief that will come in any significant way to the people who really need it. There's some talk of a piddly one-time payment to Americans and some sick leave that leaves a lot of people out and some loophole-filled ideas that make the psychopaths in Washington look like they're doing something compassionate. Checks will probably come to us, but that Uranus square says income will be haphazard. Another thing the coronavirus does is show the utter brittleness of healthcare in the United States. As I understand it, about a dozen states actually have Medicare for all that can be activated for a short time during a pandemic. But I wonder if they want to spoil us. So I guess we'll see. But it isn't good to have a pandemic when people can't afford to go to the doctor without visiting a payday lender. Having lived at half the poverty line for an extended period, I can tell you these people are gutter trash. They want your firstborn. 300% interest should be illegal. I did that once for an emergency situation, and it still makes me feel like I'm being kicked in the stomach when I think of the ordeal. And since the Saturn-Uranus square is applying, just beginning, all of this has just begun. It's going to get worse before it gets better. Some positive news is that I work from home, so I'm going to be okay. And Uranus is going to bring us all coping mechanisms and creative ideas. Whenever you see a conflict of Saturn and Uranus, Saturn only wins at first. Then Uranus breaks away because advancement has a stronger backbone than regression. I think, honestly, Uranus is going to manifest as a shift toward radicalism in the general public. Right now, American society is still somewhat conservative because people are living a long time, and there's a sizable block of older Americans who paid almost nothing for college, and for whom the minimum wage was truly a living wage. They were able to get cars and get into houses and have families, and many were even able to live on one income. But as they leave, they're being replaced by generations whose experience has been quite different. And I think we're at a turning point in a radicalizing moment. Also remember, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction isn't only a collective experience. It's being felt by each person on an intimate level. As I talk to my clients about their experience of it, one of the themes that's come up big time is that of security. People are figuring out what they can count on in their lives and what they can't, which is why the last year has been one of such insecurity and uncertainty. Saturn tests us. Pluto brings tests to their crisis points. People have been forced to make decisions about boundaries, which locks to lock and which doors to bar, who to keep and who to get rid of. We must do that on an individual level, while on a global level, countries are having to make difficult decisions about going on lockdown. And we're all seeing what we can count on as far as the establishment goes and what we can't. But how much trouble you have with this conjunction in your personal life depends upon two things: how much you like the energy, how familiar and comfortable you are with intense Saturn energy, and how disordered and unconsolidated your mind is. A great many of us are finding this time period to be a lot of work without much reward and a lot of tedium. For some of my clients, however, the Pluto-Saturn conjunction has been really good. It's been strengthening and focusing. These clients are reaping the positive side of both planets, which is a strong consolidation of wisdom, a grabbing of real personal power, and happy acceptance of limits. I've yet to see such a thing in a young person, however. Making the most out of the Pluto-Saturn conjunction tends to require that you pass your second Saturn return, which happens between the ages of 58 and 60. The purely positive expression of Pluto and Saturn is something we can shoot for as a world village. It's possible we can achieve that on a collective level. Finally, we must discuss Pluto as god of the dead. All forms of death, real and symbolic, fall under Pluto's control. Saturn carries a sickle because he's also a reaper. So it's not surprising that under their conjunction, a death toll is being highlighted daily as people pass from the coronavirus. The trauma nurse I share a home with has indicated to me that COVID-19 takes the lives of the same patients that pass from the flu. At highest risk are the elderly, especially those with COPD, emphysema, and pneumonia. Please accept my heartfelt sympathies if you've lost anyone in the pandemic. There'll be more astrology on COVID-19 as the story develops. In the meanwhile, stay hygienic, stay safe, and may the gods be kind. Thank you for listening to Secrets from an Astrologer's Desk, Coronavirus and the Outer Planets on Astroblurb, exclusively by Cosmic Arts Astrological Services.